leaders of this country have decided to disregard the people of East Palestine.
He and Tucker go on and they play act. They play act this concern for working people.
Jon Stewart took a couple of shots at Fox News host Tucker Carlson, as well as Ohio Senator Republican J.D. Vance, over their recent comments about the Ohio train derailment in East Palestine. So in this video, I got to show you Jon Stewart's comments. I have to show you a bit of what happened on this discussion on Fox News, as well as the politics that likely led up to that derailment, and also what Governor DeWine is saying right now in Ohio and who's at fault there. But first here, this is the reason I want to cover this is because this really showcases, this Fox News clip showcases how both politicians and media use events like this to their political advantage while not caring at all about any actual solutions about the issues that led up to an event like this. So before I even get to the Fox News clip to properly set up the Jon Stewart clip, J.D. Vance, again, Senator of Ohio, where this happened, did not make any comment about the train derailment until 10 days later. This was his statement he put out on February 13th. 10 days. The derailment was on the 3rd. 10 days to say anything about it. And this is the guy that Tucker Carlson has on to speak with authority on this issue. So let me play here just a bit of their discussion. It is maddening when you know the actual facts that I'll get to after this clip. But here's a taste of what they discussed.
The tragedy in Palestine, in your state, kind of points up that something is kind of wrong with the fundamentals. I mean, if there are hundreds of train derailments, like, who's paying attention to this stuff and trying to prevent it?
Well, Tucker, we've had hundreds of train derailments after we spent over $1 trillion on infrastructure in this country. So the fact that this isn't getting obviously better is a major indictment of the people spending the money and what they're spending the money on. Now, we know if you listen to Secretary Buttigieg today, that they are focused more on whether we have too many white men in construction jobs than he is on the fundamentals of his job, which is ensuring we have a viable transportation infrastructure in this country. And unfortunately, my constituents in East Palestine have been some of the main victims of the fact that we have failing infrastructure in our country, again, after spending tons of money in an effort to actually fix it.
I don't detect any urgency from the EPA or from Washington at all. Is it because these are not their voters?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that the entire country, the media complex, the leaders of this country have decided to disregard the people of East Palestine.
Just unbelievable. So I'm going to get to Jon Stewart's reaction and the facts in a second here. But Tucker's comments there near the end about urgency, not feeling any urgency from Washington. First of all, Washington, federal officials can't go in there until local state officials give them the green light. So that's part of the issue there. The other half of that is J.D. Vance didn't say anything about this till 10 days later. And Tucker's complaining about lack of urgency from Washington when Ohio's own senator didn't say shit. Now, the facts, of course, are infuriating. As I covered on Monday, there's a lot of blame to go around here, but particularly on the Trump administration and Republicans. As David Sirota, who has covered this, done a fantastic job covering this. I'm going to show a clip from his video in a second. He writes here, chemical lobbyists got Obama officials to exempt trains like the one in Ohio from hazmat safety rules. Rail lobbyists got Trump officials to repeal rules requiring better brakes on trains. And Secretary Pete hasn't moved to fix the safety rules. So when looking at this issue objectively, a lot of blame to go around. But the brakes in particular stand out. So I'm going to play for you a quick clip here from David Sirota's longer video. Again, I covered this all on Monday, but I want to show you just this piece about the brakes.
Obama's rule included that measure to expand the larger use of those brakes on the nation's rail system. But in that 2016 election year, the Republican Party got about $6 million from the rail industry. And Senate Republicans started beating the drum for Trump to repeal the rule. Donald Trump repealed the brake rule so that the industry does not have to even start to use these kinds of brakes. One former Federal Railroad Administration regulator told us that these brakes, which are known as ECP brakes, would have mitigated a disaster like this. And we just learned today, after the publication of our story, federal officials told us that this train did not have those brakes on the train.
So J.D. Vance's own colleagues, Republican senators, along with Donald Trump, were the ones that repealed a rule that would have required these newer brakes to be on these trains, including that train. Trains right now are using Civil War era brakes. Civil War era technology for their trains. This is the announcement of that repeal to not use the new brakes. This is December 13th, 2017. U.S. Department of Transportation announces intent to repeal electronically controlled pneumatic brake mandate. This happened with J.D. Vance's own party. And here he is on Tucker pretending he gives a shit. Now, again, I did a longer, I'll link to my fuller, my longer report underneath this video on YouTube in the description box, so you can check out the whole breakdown there. But let me get to Jon Stewart's comments now about this whole thing.
I can't think of a single case where any oil spill, any burn pit or whatever, it's never been like, we totally overreacted. All the birds and fish are fine. People's skin cleared up.
Except for the balloons. It's always the real stuff.
The stuff that we can go to war.
That's right.
Yeah.
We get hyped about.
That's right. And I'm so annoyed at, you've got some of these like very on the right populist figures talking about how we've got to fix this. Meanwhile, these are the motherfuckers that would never spend money on infrastructure, that always shoot those budgets down, that make it impossible for any government to regulate anything. And they're out there, J.D. Vance is out there. This infrastructure bill doesn't do that. And the working people, well, tell your fucking judges. Tell all the people you appoint then to put some teeth into the regulatory state that can force these rail companies to make the changes that they need to make these safe for workers and safe for the middle class people that are living in these towns. Man, they get up on that high horse, the Biden administration, and this Inflation Reduction Act won't fix it. Well, you know what caused it in the first place? Your fucking policies. Man, that drives me nuts.
Vance is a venture capitalist. What side of this do you think he comes down on? The hedge funds that own this, or the people in these small towns?
He and Tucker go on and they play act. They play act this concern for working people and populism. Meanwhile, everything that they put in place politically in their infrastructure is against regulatory improvements and help for working class people. It's baloney.
Jon Stewart is, of course, exactly right. And it really is just incredible that people like Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance can go on television and pretend that they're now for regulation, that they're now for regulating massive companies. The entire Republican agenda is about privatization and deregulation. That is their entire agenda. How can you pretend now that you're for putting limits on massive corporations, that you're for forcing corporations to actually consider safety risks and ensure that people aren't going to get hurt? It is so incredibly dishonest. The heart of the Republican Party is capitalism. So anything that's going to limit the ability for these massive corporations to make just a little more for their executives and shareholders is so utterly dishonest. Yet they continue parading this shit around and pretending that they're populist, that they're for the little guy. These same people that have never in their lives voted for a minimum wage raise, or never in their lives even discussed the idea of universal health care. Now, all of a sudden, they care about people? Give me a break. It's so gross. Now, let me end on an update here. I guess kind of an update. This was a discussion that was on CNN. This is with Governor DeWine, Mike DeWine, of course, of Ohio, discussing here whether or not this corporation, Norfolk Southern, the freight rail corporation, if they're going to be held responsible for all of this.
Yeah, but some business owners and East Palestine residents, they filed lawsuits against Norfolk Southern saying that the company was negligent and that they say that the company should fund court-supervised medical screenings for serious illnesses that could be caused by this exposure. Do you agree with that the company should be paying for those screenings?
look, the company should pay for everything. And, I talked to the CEO yesterday. I said, look, there's concern with some people in East Palestine that you're going to leave before you get the cleanup done. You're going to leave before the problems are dealt with. And, he pledged to me, we're going to stay. We're going to hold them to what they said. We're going to hold them accountable.
Are you? We're going to find out. I have my doubts. But it is important to note that, a governor plays a much different role than a senator does. Governors, even Republican governors, can sometimes do good. Maybe that's being a little too charitable, but they do operate in a different political lens than senators do. So they, even today, Mike DeWine didn't go along with J.D. Vance's line of blaming Joe Biden for the derailment, which you can actually put a little blame on Biden, or specifically Pete Buttigieg and his total lack of desire to rein in any of these corporations and put these new rules in place. But anyways, again, I covered a lot of that in my first video on Monday. But we're going to see if these corporations are held accountable. And, more to the point, how to prevent this in the future. Because how to prevent this is ultimately what matters most. Instead of, the cleanup and all that, yes, that's important now because it happened. But it's better if it didn't happen at all. And for it not to happen, you need certain regulations in place, regulations that Republicans do not support. You need that in place to actually prevent a disaster like this.